Welcome to the first instructor's YouTube video for our unit on Islam, Module 8, Part 1. In this module, we're going to hit just a little bit of the background on Islam, something about the terms, and then a bit about the demography and geography of Islam. First, some information regarding the basic terms. The word Islam means submission, but when you, in Arabic, but when you make it a proper noun with a capital I, Islam means submission to Allah. Muslim, on the other hand, with a capital M, refers to one who submits to Allah, or one who does Islam. So Islam is the term used for the religion. Muslim is the term used for the individual who practices Islam. Just a few words on the Prophet Muhammad. That's M-U-H-A-M-M-A-D. For Muslims, Muhammad is referred to as the seal of the prophets, S-E-A-L, the seal of the prophets, meaning that, according to Muslims, Muhammad was the person who received the final revelation from God, or Allah. And by the way, Allah comes from the words A-L, which is the, plus L-A-H, which means God. Allah, the God. Nothing mysterious about it at all. It's simply the Arabic translation of the English word God. And in fact, Muslims worship the God of Abraham, since the Arab Muslims trace their spiritual pedigree back to Abraham through Ishmael, and they worship the God of Abraham, which is the very same God that Jews and Christians worship. Of course, they perceive of God somewhat differently, but after all, Jews do as well when compared to Christians. Anyway, so no big mystery there. Same basic God. Allah just simply means the God in Arabic. So anyway, Muhammad is thought to be the person that received the final revelation from God. So all prophets are important, and Islam recognizes the many prophets of Judaism that are found in the Bible, and also recognizes Jesus as a prophet, a legitimate prophet of God. It's just that Muhammad is sort of like the first among equals, since for whatever reason God chose to deliver the final revelation to Muhammad. Muslims do not worship Muhammad. Muhammad is simply viewed as being a prophet that is sort of first among equals. In regard to the demographics and geography of Islam, you'll see a map that's popped up here, and those countries that have the highest percentage of Muslims by population are the darkest in the map. And so that's why all across North Africa and the Middle East you see a very dark color used to shade in the countries, and that's because in many of these countries over 90% of the individuals in those countries are Muslim. However, when you look at Asia over to the right, particularly Indonesia, the islands out there, you'll see that the shading is not as dark. However, you actually have a greater total number of Muslims in those areas. It's just that they don't comprise significant percentages of the total population. In the Americas, Suriname is the only country. Suriname is on the northern coast of South America. It's the only country with a significant percentage of Muslims, about 13%. In the United States, there are about 3 million Muslims, or about 1% of the population. In regard to the world, there are about 1.6 billion Muslims today, or about 23% of the world's population. According to most sources that I've come across, Islam is currently the fastest growing religion in the world. And this is for two reasons. Number one has to do with conversions. It's been noted in a few places that Islam is enjoying the greatest number of conversions per year in the world compared to other religions. As I said, some point to a high birth rate in Islamic communities. But whatever the case, it's thought to be the fastest growing religion in the world. So, for example, according to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is a world Christian database, Islam, in fact, is the fastest growing religion in the world. It's projected that about almost 27% of the world's population will be Muslim by 2030. Islam comprises about 90% of the population in 30 different countries. Most Muslims are actually Asian. In fact, over 1 billion Muslims are Asian. And interestingly enough, Arabs comprise less than 20% of the world's Muslims. So less than 20% of the world's Muslims are actually Arab. And that has a lot to do with the fact that the Arab countries are very arid and sparsely populated and desert-like to some extent, and the population density is far lower than that of Asia. In fact, the 4 countries with the largest Muslim population in order are Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, all Asian nations. In that map that you saw a while ago, the darkest areas comprise the areas where Islam initially spread up to through about the 8th century. It was only later, about the 11th century, when traders began to bring Islam to Asia, that it spread out there in those other areas. And it wasn't until about the 16th century or so that Islam became a force in Asia. Finally, I'd like to say a few words about the Qur'an. Qur'an. The Qur'an is, of course, the preeminent holy book, holy scriptures of Islam, and the word means something like recitation. Recitation. It comes from a root word or verb meaning to recite. So it's generally translated as recitation because actually Muhammad was commanded by Allah to recite. It's like, here I'm giving you the information, now you need to tell other people. It was thought that Muhammad received his first revelation around 610 CE when he was 40 years old. And these revelations would come to him through the angel Gabriel, the very same angel that's spoken of in Christian scriptures. And he would receive these revelations until he died, until about 632. So what is that? That's about 22 years or so. In fact, for about the first 13 years of that period, he was in Mecca and received his revelations there. He then relocated to Medina. So for about the last 9 or 10 years of his life, he was receiving revelations in Medina. It was about 650 when, and this was during the 3rd Caliph, Caliph. That would be a successor to Muhammad. It was during that reign, around 650, that the powers to be actually got together and actually wrote down the Qur'an in the version that we have today. So the Qur'an, if anything, is a very authentic holy book. You can literally read what was written down in 650. It was a very sort of classic formal Arabic, and it's not necessarily the way people speak Arabic today, but they can certainly read it today. And they're actually reading the words that were written down in 650 CE. So it's very authentic in that way. In case you're wondering, a person that memorizes the entire Qur'an is called a Hafiz. H-A-F-I-Z. Hafiz. Muhammad was one. He was supposedly the first Hafiz. And when he died, there were supposedly 22 of them. And it was said that, given the wars that were being fought and the battles that were being fought, they were actually losing these Hafiz, people who had memorized the Qur'an from beginning to end. And so it was thought that they better get this information down before they lose it. And so that's why, in a relatively short period of time, only 18 years after Muhammad had died, they first wrote down the Qur'an. As far as the structure, there are 114 surahs, S-U-R-A-H, 114 chapters in the Qur'an. It's about the length of the New Testament, and the chapters are arranged roughly in order of size, with the longer ones occurring near the beginning and the shorter ones near the end. In regard to the content, if you're familiar with the Bible, then you will be familiar with some of what's written in the Qur'an, because you read a lot about, for example, Moses, who is mentioned, I think, about 125 times. He's mentioned more often than any other single person in the Qur'an, Moses. Jesus himself is mentioned about 25 times. Adam is mentioned about 25 times. So you'll see some familiar names, some familiar stories, although there's a slightly different take on these stories. Like, for example, Jesus was said not to have been crucified, but to have been sort of assumed into heaven, although they do speak of Jesus' virgin birth. And interestingly enough, Jesus is the only person in the Qur'an that was said to have been born as a result of a virgin birth. Surah 96 was said to be the very first revelation given to Muhammad. In fact, the first 5 verses of this surah were thought to have been the very first that Muhammad received. And here's what it says in English. Proclaim in the name of thy Lord and Cherisher, who created man out of a mere clot of congealed blood. Proclaim, and thy Lord is most bountiful. He who taught the use of the pen taught man that which he knew not. So supposedly that is the very first words revealed to Muhammad from Allah through the angel Gabriel. Muslims believe that the true Qur'an is written in Arabic. And actually, a Qur'an written in Arabic is considered to be sacred. So you're supposed to handle it reverently. You're supposed to be pure when you handle it. You're not supposed to drop it on the floor. It should have an exalted place in your household. And just generally treat it with reverence and respect, because it is considered to be a sacred object. Now, for translations of the Qur'an, not so much. They're not really considered to be sacred. And it's thought that if a person really wants to know what is in the Qur'an, they need to read the Arabic, because after all, Arabic is the language God used when he spoke to Muhammad.